It's still day one at ITB, and I'm sitting here with Norm Rose. So Norm, you have quite a background. You've been doing this for many years in travel technology. But today, and most recently, all we've been talking about is blockchain. It seems like every article we get submitted to TNOOZ is about blockchain, which is fair because it is, in some ways revolutionary. In some ways it seems cyclical, like another database, right? But let's talk about actual applications, concrete things that are being used in travel today. What would you say? What are some of those examples?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that it is a little premature with blockchain to talk about concrete examples, because you're talking about a new technology. So if we were sitting here and it was 1990 and you said, tell me the practical applications for the internet, how would I have responded? Well, I was actually at Sun Microsystems at that point, and I was familiar with the global network. We sent out messages, so I could kind of describe that, but until you actually got the look and feel of it, no. So the blockchain is really an infrastructural change for travel. Now, how that ends up rolling out, whether it's through some type of identity application where you've seen and you've reported on the fact that the World Economic Forum is doing a known traveler example. That's going to take some time, but the idea that you can retain your own identity and use it across different platforms is key. I think probably the most practical application of blockchain in the near term will be around two areas: fraud and settlement. Naturally, settlement is, again, it's a very simple thing to understand, which is rather than having middlemen taking a piece of the settlement, it is possible that the supplier and the buyer can get together via blockchain, resolve the transaction, and get paid almost immediately. So I think the settlement piece is going to be the most visible form of blockchain in the near term. And then the idea of fraud, if you have a record that's immutable and it's shared across all these distributed ledgers, it's very difficult to commit fraud. Now, that being said, there's lots of bad actors out there that are going to find ways of doing that. You've probably read about different digital currencies being stolen and so forth. But I think at its core, fraud is probably, again, the number two, or it could be number one application for blockchain in travel.
Let's talk a little bit about smart contracts in the context of blockchain. Maybe do a quick introduction about what a smart contract is, but it also seems like maybe some of the contractual headaches and burdens of some of these things might be alleviated, and making sure that people do get paid in the right way. Yeah.
Well, it's that level of transparency you have with a smart contract. It basically is executable code that happens automatically upon an event. It's as simple as that. So therefore, if I am let's say in the corporate market, I have a hotel agreement with XYZ chain or independent hotels, and the transaction happens, then it gets stored on the blockchain and basically allows, perhaps as I said a moment ago, settlement to happen a lot quicker, and in general, things to be more efficient. We're still pretty early relative to even seeing a transaction on a blockchain today, but I think it's coming very rapidly.
What are some of the potential, so we're not quite there as true applications, but what are some of the areas, certain companies or other things that you might actually see using blockchain the soonest? Where do you see that going?
Well, at the session today, we're going to have three panelists, including the CEO of Winding Tree, which is trying to do an open, permissionless blockchain for transactions. A gentleman from TUI, which is already using blockchain for distribution of putting hotel content there. And then someone from Amadeus, who now has, Amadeus named blockchain as one of the key drivers that's coming. So I think there's some practicality within that group that we'll talk about, but a lot of it's still somewhat conceptual and somewhat early in development.
So one last question on the hype front as we kind of the thread here. So, is there something that needs to happen for the hype to become real? Is it just time, or is there some other impediment?
Well, the first thing I start out with my presentation today is a picture of a faucet, and then I build to showing the plumbing. Everyone in our industry is focused on the faucet. Everyone wants to know, well, if this is going to eliminate OTAs, who's going to do the interface, or it's going to eliminate TMCs. I think all that is a bit rhetoric and bit hype at this point, because you're building the plumbing, you're not building the front end. So we're going to see old and new suppliers come in and use blockchain and build front ends, and it just could change their role a bit going down line. But it's certainly something that we're at the very, very start of.
the cyclical piece again I keep coming back to, because I mean travel technology started as a plumbing issue. It was like being able to connect to all these supply, and now here we are again, kind of just different way to connect, you know?
Well, everyone wants to reduce costs, and that's where the opportunity for blockchain, if it's done correctly. But you know, the thing about blockchain, which is important to understand, is I keep on talking about how immature it is. Part of the aspects of being immature is that it's not very fast. Now, there are a number of things, whether it's on Bitcoin with the Lightning Network or the Plasma Initiative on Ethereum, they're all trying to mostly put probably a private blockchain on top of a public blockchain. And the private aspect would do the transactions much faster and then get written to the public blockchain for verification, authentication.
So speed is still an issue.
Speed is still an issue right now, but it's a lot of smart people working on this area, and it's outside of travel. Travel is never going to solve the world of any emerging tech. We're a user of emerging tech, not always the first user, and then we have to perfect it for whatever we need. So lots of hype, and it's unfortunate because hype does kind of make people think kind of black and white. It's not realistic, or it is realistic, and it's really somewhere in a gray area right now. There, I think the hype is warranted, but not immediately. So it's happening. 2 to 3 years is probably my best prediction of it actually having some transactions of any significance going across on the blockchain. And by the way, the blockchain is not a database. It's a distributed ledger. So
what's the difference between a ledger and a database? That to me is always like a question.
Well, to me, a database you can query and really put elements together and kind of find out answers. All that you're going to do on a query on a blockchain is look up the transaction, which is all encrypted anyway. And so I have a slide I showed today, which is a picture of a block, and has a bunch of code, has a map showing Iceland. So someone from Iceland was involved with that block, but that's it. You don't know. And the only people who know the truth about that are the people who own the private and the public keys in order to decipher that. So
always have the image of the ledger of just the old shopkeeper putting in ledger, right? So it's like it went from ledger, and then database is like more of two-way. So let you kind of think of it that way. Ledger is something that's in someone's desk, and they only have access to it unless you're in the desk, right? So it's kind of that idea.
That's right. It's meant as a record-keeping device rather than a database of information to pull information from.
So in 2020, ITB 2020, we'll be here and we'll find out if we had this correct.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I've had a lot of successes, but I've had some misses over the years. But certainly I think people would agree that mobile has made an impact. I talked about that in the beginning of 2000s. I think blockchain is kind of, again, beginning of the wave, but it's going to be a big one when it does hit.
Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.